talk about Season 2 of Justice Talk, where it's just us talking.
And what is Justice Talk?
Justice Talk is a podcast where we talk about the Douglas County Sheriff's Office and the community we serve.
Welcome, everyone, to another Justice Talk podcast. Today's an exciting day. I'm just going to be with you for a few moments, but I have the opportunity to be in the room with our Victim Assistance Unit, who is here today, and they're going to talk a lot about what they do, how they serve the citizens of Douglas County and those who come and visit here. But I wanted to take just a moment or two and talk a little bit about Victims' Rights Week, which is April 19th through the 25th. And this is a very important topic, and I think this is a great opportunity for us to recognize victim advocates and the work that they do, but also talk a little bit about who they serve. And I'm going to let the experts do that. I'm just going to say just a couple quick things. It is an honor, as always, to be the Sheriff of Douglas County, but more importantly, to work with the folks that work in the Victim Assistance Unit who do the work that is incredibly difficult, but also important to the victims of crimes. And we're here to honor those professionals who assist and to offer guidance, information, support, encouragement to victims of crime. And that is those victim advocates that work here in the Douglas County and across the state of Colorado. And I think it's important to help understand that what they do is help rebuild these victims' lives during probably the most scariest and difficult times and uncertain times when they have fallen victim to a crime of victim, or a crime, and then making them a victim. So I get the pleasure of introducing. I'm going to introduce is the sergeant going to come in here and do some work today? He's not going to do that. No, that's okay. And that's the great part about doing these podcasts is that we can ad-lib like crazy, so feel free to do that. I'm just going to spend a little bit of time, and I will recognize Sergeant Anthony Arutinoff, who is the sergeant over the Victim Assistance Unit. And then I will go around and just have you guys introduce yourself just real quickly, and then we will kind of move into the topic. So I'll start to my right and go that way, I guess. So,
hi, I'm Andrea Bradbury, and I'm a victim advocate.
Hi, I'm Maddie Ring, and I'm also a victim advocate.
I'm Sarah Barr, also a victim advocate.
Oh, and hey, there's no mic here, but for Julie Widmer, she's about to be in this spot where I'm at right now. So she's going to say a few things. So Julie, sorry about that. I looked over there and I'm like, we're one mic short. So I hope that two things happen. One, you get a lot of information from this podcast, and if you, when you do, and or if you have any questions about any of the work that they do, or if you have a concern about something in regarding to victim advocacy, always go to dcsheriff.net, and there's information on how you can get a hold of all of these victim advocates and how you can reach out to the Douglas County Sheriff's Office to get information. So what I would encourage you to do is if you have something you want to ask, write a note down and then reach out to us. So again, thank you all for the work that you do, the four of you and your sergeant, and the work that you put into providing service to victims. And what a pleasure it is to have an opportunity to have Victims' Rights Week that is recognized across the state of Colorado for those professionals who do this so important and very complicated and difficult work. So thank you all for being here. I'm going to turn it over to you experts now. Slide away so Julie can have the spot that I am in. And I know she can't wait to do that. And I'm going to turn it over to you. Keeping in mind that this is their first time that I know of doing a podcast. Okay, so the key to that is that you're always talking, okay? Somebody's got to be talking. Dead air is a bad thing. Is that right there, Jason? See, all right. Thank you all very much for having me, and I'll turn it over to whoever wants to start. So thank you, guys.
Well, I'll start and tell you guys a little bit about the history of victim rights. So in 1981, President Ronald Reagan proclaimed the first National Crime Victim Rights Week. It was to acknowledge the abuse and trauma that victims of crimes often experience and to recognize the tireless work of all the dedicated advocates who have taken up the cause of supporting supporting crime victims across our country. In 1982, President Ronald Reagan was concerned that victims didn't have a voice, so he formed a presidential task force to study the treatment of crime victims in America and the criminal justice process. After a long and tedious study, the task force concluded that the treatment of the crime victims in America was actually a national disgrace, thus starting a transformation in America of changing this. Colorado voters passed the Victim Rights Amendment in November of 1992, and we implemented this in January of 1993 so that our crime victims in the state of Colorado were afforded a lot of different rights.
Which is an amazing thing. So this is Deputy Blanchard stepping in. It's not actually Julie. Julie didn't want to come and chat today, but she's my support system here in the background as we do this. One of the things I'd like to say a lot of times is that the reason you guys exist is because cops aren't great at hugging, but that's not even close to true. I'm a big hugger myself, but like what it really comes down to is that a lot of times law enforcement, the patrol division specifically, doesn't have time to follow up with a lot of things. And that's where a lot of you and what you do, you step in to be able to be that support system afterwards. Do you want to explain a little bit? That was the history of how it kind of started. Why don't you tell us a little bit about more what your day-to-day looks like?
So our day-to-day, we get assigned all of our cases that are Victim Rights Act cases. So the Victim Rights Act in Colorado covers cases that are essentially crimes against persons. So things like domestic violence, simple assault, menacing, sexual assault, child abuse, human trafficking, those types of things are all encompassed under the Victim Rights Act. So we are assigned those cases and we jump in immediately into working with our detectives, reaching out to the victims, seeing what they need to ensure their safety and start the process of healing and help them understand and empower them to understand the criminal justice system so that they can engage in the investigation and hopefully eventually the prosecution as well.
That's fantastic. And that's again where we just on patrol don't have time to follow up with that. You guys are some of the busier people I know in this office because turns out there's a lot of victims on a lot of different levels. Mm-hmm. You mentioned some of the specific crimes. Is that all of the specific crimes that you guys are there for?
No, there's a long list. I don't know the number of. There's a lot.
Are we able? Yeah, no, that's okay. Do we have an actual definition, like a clean definition of what a victim is?
So it's the person who's initially affected, like the person who endured the criminal act. And then also we have co-victims, so people who are also affected. So let's say if someone's daughter is murdered, then that person, the daughter, is a victim, but then their parents are also considered victims.
And I think that's a huge point to make to people is that just because I wasn't the direct victim, I wasn't the one who was hurt or involved, there's going to be family or friends or whatever might be around that situation that is going to be part of that. Mm-hmm. So what does we got the how did the actual week start? How did like this particular thing? Is it for just awareness or what do you think?
So Ronald Reagan felt that the defendants were getting much more protections and much more things afforded to them than the victims were. And so he had developed this task force to find out how can we better enable the victims to have a voice in court and to be afforded the protections in a no less vigorous effort than what we were giving the defendants. And so when he did that on a national level, it was up to the states individually to pass their own victim rights. And so each state did that over the last 20 years or so. And as I said, ours was in 1993 that we started that.
And so in 93 was when this actual celebration or awareness week started.
Well, actually, the Awareness Week started in 1981. It started before the Victim Rights Amendment was passed. He started celebrating victims prior to the amendment for each state. But in our state, we started celebrating it when we passed it.
Okay, and it's kind of a weird word to say celebrate, because it is a celebration because victims now have rights, which is different than a normal celebration. We're not saying, it's whatever other celebration we can do. It's specifically saying, thank goodness victims finally have rights. Because there was a long time where they didn't. People would just kind of have something done to them, and then afterwards just be left hanging, left dangling, try to figure it out. So tell us about that. I mean, what kind of support do you offer in the situation for, if say there's a domestic or something like that?
Yeah, for domestic violence cases, there's a lot of different ways things can go depending on whether the suspect is in custody or not. We do a lot of safety planning with victims, especially if there are kids involved. There are other steps that we take when kids have witnessed things or been involved in those acts as well. Getting them connected with other resources outside of the justice system, like our crisis center, counseling, lots of different ways to help support them through different avenues. We also, if the person is in custody, make sure that they're connected with the DA's office, and that they know what that process is going to look like on that next day for court. Making sure the detective and the victim and us are all on the same page.
And I got to be honest, I had no idea you guys do that much, because on the patrol end, it's pretty much, all right, you're a victim. Here's the pamphlet that gives you information. Call these people and they'll take care of you from here. But a lot of times these relationships, is that the right way to word it? Relationships kind of last longer than just a week afterwards.
Oh, yeah.
Do you guys want to tell us anything, without details, obviously, any success stories or anything like that where you were able to be there through a longer case or anything like that?
Mm-hmm. I think for me at least, just when I get to work with someone for a long amount of time and I get to bear witness to them finding their strength and them seeing that they are capable of having a voice and speaking up for themselves and starting to heal and rebuilding their lives. So without getting too specific, I've certainly seen a number of victims do that, where they rebuild from a horrible place where they're homeless or they're dependent on someone who's very badly abusing them. And then even just a couple of months down the road, I've had victims secure long-term housing, get jobs, get promotions, stop that cycle of violence and start healing and loving themselves. And so it's really wonderful to get to see that.
Oh, man, I respect you guys so much. Thank you for what you do from everybody, because it's a terrible situation to leave someone hanging when they've facing something. I've heard a lot of stories of people that are victims of domestic violence that never report it because they're scared of what the repercussions, and the fact that I hope everybody out there is encouraged. If you're in a terrible situation like that, get it taken care of now, because there are resources to start helping you get through things. If you are dependent or whatever that term we would fall under, right?
Mm-hmm. And like Maddie said, we are assigned cases when we come in, but we also are called out to scene. So depending on what the situation is, we may be called out to a suicide to help those survivors that are left. We may be called to a hospital for a sex assault exam to help somebody through that. We may be called to a domestic violence or a fire or a robbery. And it isn't always something that is a victim rights crime. So suicide, for example, is not on a victim rights brochure, but it is something that here in Douglas County, we support people. We support people for a natural death. It's still very traumatic and very upsetting, and we are called out to that to try to help them with some grief resources or just being there to help them navigate what those next steps look like.
Well, it is just amazing what you guys do, and from us and I think the entire community, for all four of you and wherever your sergeant's hiding off in the back, you guys are just amazing, and we appreciate what you do so much. And I know that even though you're not always highlighted on what you're doing out there, I hope that everybody out there listening to this and beyond recognize that you guys are true heroes behind the front line that everybody is always recognizing. You guys really deserve some real recognition for what you guys do. So thank you very much. With that, is there anything, I think, do you want to touch on what the theme is this year, and then we'll wrap up?
Yeah, the theme of this year's celebration of victim rights is seek justice, ensure victim rights, and inspire hope. And I know for each of us, that theme rings true into the work that we do every day. We seek justice for victims by helping them engage in the investigation and educating them on the criminal justice system. We ensure victim rights by making sure that the people we work with understand their rights and know where they can speak up and what that looks like. And then we inspire hope by helping victims see the strengths that they already possess and taking control back over their lives. And then we connect them with the support that they need to help work through the trauma that they've experienced so they can begin that process of healing.
Well, absolutely a worthy cause, and hopefully everybody out there knows that if you are a victim, please get it reported right away and get out of that victim role, and get these wonderful people to start getting you to work through that system. So I think that's all I've got. You guys have anything else you'd like to add?
I also wanted to talk about strangulation a little bit, whether that's with a domestic violence case, an assault case, or a sex assault case. It's very common, more common than people think, and it's extremely dangerous. So, a lot of people talk about choking. And when I say strangulation, I want to make sure everybody understands what I mean, that is any pressure on the outside of your neck that causes a restriction to your airflow or your blood flow. So there's a lot of different medical things that can result from that we've learned a lot through more recent years. It can be very dangerous and resulting in death from, just the next day, 2 weeks later even. So it's just something that's very, very dangerous, and that's another thing that the forensic nurses can help with. They're specially trained to do exams on strangulation cases to make sure that there's no internal damage that we might not be able to see on the outside. Most of the time, at least half the time, we cannot see any marks on the outside, but that does not mean that there's not damage internally. Things that can happen are if damage to your artery happens, you could get a blood clot that eventually breaks off, goes to your brain, and causes you to have a stroke. That's just one of the things that can happen. So we take those cases very seriously and strongly encourage anybody who's had that happen to them to seek medical attention and get that exam to make sure that they're okay.
Also, we just wanted to give a shout out to all the victims that we have worked with throughout the years, as this week is not only to bring awareness about victims' rights and your voices, but also your recovery and your successes, and to just celebrate all of you that have ever been a victim of a crime and having the strength to survive and recover with that, and allowing us to be a part of your success and process with any of that, regardless if it was through the courts or if you chose not to report, but we could still help, and to just know that we are your advocates for life, regardless of any time that happened. We're always in your corner. So this week is to celebrate you as well.
We acknowledge that it takes a lot of courage for you to come forward and report or ask for help when you are in those situations where you're not safe.
Well, thank you guys again so much. You are awesome, and we appreciate you, and we hope everybody out there recognizes that there's a whole lot of appreciation that needs to go towards you. So thank you for everything you do, and we will talk to you again soon.
Thank you, Jason.
Well, thanks for joining us, everyone, on today's podcast.
And remember, you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and you can always watch these podcasts on YouTube.